SuieishinDojo. Yeah. SuieishinDojo. From silence to impact.
So I want you to do me a favor. Just take every image you have in your head right now about a ninja. You know, the black pajamas, the magic smoke bombs.
Oh, yeah, those mythical assassins dropping from the ceiling in the movies.
Right, exactly. Take all of that and just throw it completely out the window. Just forget pop culture for a minute.
We really have to. Because when you strip away centuries of that theatrical myth, and look at the actual historical record, what you find is just so much more fascinating. And honestly, it's far more terrifying than anything Hollywood could come up with.
Yeah, so today we are ripping apart that myth. We're looking at actual historical records for this deep dive to figure out how these, well, essentially outcasts, mastered the absolute ultimate art of human survival.
Right, we're talking about radical adaptability here. And this brutal conquering of the human ego that turns just, ordinary people into Japan's ancient shadow warriors.
It's wild. And to do this, we're pulling from Kasemzugari's historical texts, specifically his work on ancient shadow warriors, and this translated relic called Tengu Gems of Thought and Sentiment.
Yeah, and it's a journey that takes us from these incredibly inhospitable, mountainous provinces during Japan's civil wars, all the way down into some really intense psychological duels.
We're even going to get into the genuinely horrifying physical lengths these guys went to just for the sake of a disguise.
Oh, absolutely. The disguise stuff is, we'll get there, but it's intense.
Okay, let's unpack this and ground it in the reality of the era first. Because to understand their psychology, you have to look at the pressure cooker that actually forged them, right?
Right.
So picture Japan in the late 1400s. They're stepping into what's known as the Sengoku period, which literally translates to the age of the country at war.
And, it's hard to overstate just the sheer level of chaos during this time. Following the Onin War, the central government essentially just collapsed.
Like total breakdown of law and order.
Exactly. Their authority barely reached past the capital's borders, right? So the rest of the country descends into this endless, grinding civil war. Warlords fighting warlords, roving bands of mercenaries, rampant famine.
Just a total nightmare for the average person.
Nightmare. If you were an ordinary person, mainstream society offered you absolutely zero protection.
So, if you're a fugitive or an exiled warrior or just some guy trying to escape the slaughter, where do you go? You flee into the mountains.
Right. Specifically, the historical accounts point to the provinces of Iga and Koga.
Which geographically were just a mess to get through, right?
Oh, incredibly difficult. Deep valleys, thick mist, just surrounded by steep mountains. It was basically the perfect off-the-grid haven.
Right.
And because they were totally cut off from, mainstream Japanese society and all those rigid feudal rules, these escaping expatriates just formed their own autonomous families.
Which creates this incredible melting pot of survival tactics. You have former samurai, disgraced tacticians, outlaws, all essentially sharing the same campfire.
Yeah, and they're forced to pool their combat knowledge and really adapt it to this rugged, guerrilla-style environment.
And that desperation, that sheer necessity to survive completely outside the bounds of normal society, that is where the real art is born.
Which is actually reflected brilliantly in the language itself. The very word ninjutsu holds this really powerful dual meaning.
Oh, right, the characters.
Yeah, so the character nin, when you pronounce it shinobu, it means to endure, to support, to be tenacious. But when you pronounce it shinobasuru, it means to hide, to be furtive, to be secretive.
So you really cannot have the secretive vanishing aspect without that immense grounding capacity to just endure.
Exactly. And there's a famous teaching from a renowned 20th century practitioner, Takamatsu Toshitsugu. He summarized this entire mental doctrine perfectly. He said, the color of the water is the color of its face.
The color of the water is the color of its face. That is just a beautiful way to describe pure adaptability.
It really is.
There's actually a comparison drawn in some of the historical insights we were looking at that equates this to the mind and body of a young child. And it immediately clicked for me. Yeah, think about a toddler. I remember trying to wrestle my nephew into a car seat once, and the kid was like a liquid.
Just completely boneless.
Exactly. There is zero difference between their flexible physical body and their flexible mental attitude. They just sort of flow around obstacles.
Right, and that childlike fluidity is exactly the goal here. Ninjutsu fundamentally requires this deep intuitive knowledge of the union of opposites.
Which means?
Well, to become that water, to seamlessly take the shape of whatever vase you are poured into, it requires a really profound loss of the ego.
Okay, hold on, though. When I hear lose the ego, my brain immediately pictures, like, a monk meditating peacefully on a mountaintop. But for these outcasts, losing the ego meant something a lot more violent, didn't it?
Oh, utterly violent. I mean, this isn't about finding inner peace for the sake of spiritual enlightenment. It's a discipline purely dedicated to not being wiped from existence.
Right, you're not fighting for a trophy.
No, you aren't fighting for honor on some organized battlefield. You are fighting to literally survive absolute obliteration. And to do that, you have to completely shed who you think you are. You drop your pride, your preferred fighting style, your very identity.
Because if your ego gets in the way, you die.
Exactly. Knowing the nature of the danger makes it possible to circumvent it, but only if you aren't rigidly attached to your own ego.
Okay, but mastering your internal state is really only the first step. The real test is taking that fluid mind and translating it into how your physical body actually moves through a hostile environment.
Which brings us to the actual term for these guys.
Right, because during these civil wars, these warriors were called a lot of things. Kusa, Supa. But the truest historical term was Kanja.
Yes, Kanja. The ideogram ja means nobody. And Kanja translates to the man of the intersection, or that which is between the things. My personal favorite translation is actually the man in the middle.
The man in the middle. It paints such a clear picture. You know, you aren't forcing your way into a room. You were just slipping into the gaps of the environment.
Exactly. You are an individual completely free of external pressure, just highly sensitive to the natural order around you.
And this hypersensitivity led to a very specific, almost unbelievable physical technique called musoku no ho.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Yeah, the historical accounts describe it as a method of movement where all muscular tension is relaxed, making the movement seemingly disappear from an enemy's vision. Now, I have to push back here.
Sure.
Relaxing your muscles makes you invisible. I mean, that sounds an awful lot like the Hollywood magic we just explicitly threw out the window.
I know. It sounds deeply mystical until you actually break down the evolutionary biology and the psychology behind human perception.
Okay, lay it on me.
Think about how a normal person, or even a highly trained conventional soldier, moves when they are about to attack. They tense up, right? Yeah. They drop their shoulder, they grit their teeth, they plant their feet. They are heavily telegraphing. They project their intent.
Right, like a boxer winding up for a massive right hook. You can visibly see the kinetic energy building before the punch even lands.
Precisely. And our human brains, specifically the amygdala, are hardwired by evolution to detect those micro-tensions as predatory threats.
So we're looking for the tension.
Yes. Your peripheral vision picks up that shift in weight, and your brain just screams, danger. What Musoku no Ho does is systematically strip away all that brute force and muscular tension.
Oh, okay. So it reminds me of a car rolling down a steep hill in neutral.
Okay, I like that.
Like, there's no engine revving, there's no gears grinding to give you any auditory warning. You turn around, and the car is just suddenly right on top of you, moving fast, basically because it didn't telegraph its acceleration.
That is a perfect analogy. If there is no tension, there is no telegraphing. You aren't turning invisible. You are just moving entirely outside of the enemy's biological threat detection loop.
That is wild.
And this physical looseness is intrinsically tied to a mental state known as shinmyogen.
Which is the ability to sense danger before it happens, right?
Yes, but again, this isn't psychic magic. Shinmyogen is an intense state of awareness built on brutal life experience. You are basically synthesizing the technique of the past, the present, and the future in real time.
Wow.
It's the wisdom to apply knowledge in the present moment to envisage and avoid what is coming next. When you combine that predictive, hyper-aware wisdom with a body completely free of tension,
you just move faster than their perception.
Exactly. You quote-unquote disappear because they didn't even realize you had started moving until the blade was already there.
Which brings us to a really stunning historical account. I mean, we actually have a clear example of what happens when this lack of internal tension clashes with raw, ego-driven brute force.
Oh, you mean the duel in the province of Aizu?
Yes. This is one of the clearest examples we have. Here's where it gets really interesting. It's the story of Ishibukuya from the Tengu Gems text. Ishibukuya was this quiet, unassuming, almost odd-looking young man. The local townspeople totally thought he was weak, but what they didn't know is that he had been trained in secret by a legendary swordmaster, Sukahara Bokuden.
And he trained intensely.
Yeah, for years. He practiced alone in the moonlight. Observers later described him as moving like a wraith, like practicing with this muted but lightning-like ferocity.
And then on the other side, you have the antagonist of the story, Ishihara Ichihei. He is the exact polar opposite.
Totally. Ishihara is this wealthy, brash, famous swordsman. He hears these whispered rumors about Ishii and decides to travel to Aizu just to publicly challenge him to a duel.
And he brings quite the entourage.
Yeah, he is not a subtle guy. He brings 45 of his students with him just to watch. He shows up at the bridge on the outskirts of town carrying a massive 4-foot wooden sword that is literally reinforced with heady steel.
Which is just the ultimate clash of paradigms. You have the loud, external, muscle-driven warrior against the quiet, internal, tensionless practitioner.
Exactly. So picture the scene. It's sunset. The crowd is gathered at the bridge. Ishihara takes one look at this quiet kid, naturally assumes he's going to totally crush him, and loudly issues the challenge.
And Ishii's response is just brilliant.
He doesn't hesitate. He simply picks up a completely normal, mid-sized wooden sword leaning nearby. Ishihara points his giant steel weapon at Ishii's feet in this heavy traditional guard, and then Ishii just transforms.
He essentially achieves total psychological victory before a single strike is even thrown.
Right, because Ishii assumes his stance, the Ichi no Tachi no Kame. Basically, he raises the sword into this perfectly balanced, utterly still posture that projects zero movement but infinite potential.
And his face changes, right?
Yeah, the historical records actually note that his demeanor underwent a terrifying shift. His face morphed into an expression of raw demonic intensity. They compared it to the warrior god Hachiman Marashiten, who is this fearsome, wrathful deity in Japanese mythology.
Just pure lethal intent.
Pure intent. Ishii looks at Ishihara and calmly states, "I can cut your throat faster than you can cut me with that heavy weapon."
And the outcome of this standoff is just the ultimate testament to the art. Ishihara looks at this fierce, unblinking expression on Ichi's face, and he recognizes true mastery.
He drops the sword.
He drops his heavy steel weapon and completely surrenders. He admits defeat right in front of his 45 students without a single blow being struck.
It's just ironic. I mean, Ishihara brought a giant steel weapon and an audience, and Ishii brought literally nothing but lethal intent.
Well, if we dissect why Ishihara surrendered, it wasn't fear of some magic trick. He surrendered because of Ichi's complete and utter lack of doubt.
Right.
We just talked about Musakunoho, that removal of tension. Ishii had zero internal conflict. He possessed a perfect, terrifying alignment of mental and physical flexibility that just projected absolute, unavoidable death.
So Ishihara knew he was already dead.
Yes. Despite his massive strength, Ishihara recognized that the split second he tried to heave that massive telegraphing sword upward, Ishii's tensionless blade would already be in his throat. Ishii's mind won the battle before physics even got involved.
That is mind over muscle in its absolute purest form. But, mastering that level of flawless execution, that zero-doubt mentality, it really requires you to abandon normal human limitations.
It does.
And it goes beyond just dueling. I mean, if your face is well known, all the mental stillness in the world won't save you from a heavily guarded checkpoint. This is where that mental surrender to survival becomes physically horrifying.
Right, because survival wasn't just about winning duels. It was heavily dependent on hensujutsu, which is the art of disguise. We're not talking about putting on a different hat or, a fake mustache.
Oh, not at all. We actually missed one example from the Tengu texts about the extreme dexterity required before we even get to the mutilation.
Oh, the old man, Izu Kamitono.
Yes. A master of senkin or shuriken jutsu. The story goes he kept 4 needles hidden in his hair. And at Shiba Palace, with basically Tengu-like dexterity, he hit the 4 painted hooves of a horse on a cedar door twice without missing.
That level of skill is crazy.
Yeah.
When you look at actual disguise, hensujutsu goes to incredibly dark places. The texts outline some extreme methods like capping teeth with iron or creating false illness using moxitreesins.
Which brings us to maybe the most shocking example, Yasube Horebe.
Oh boy, yeah.
He was one of the famous 47 Ronin, so he needed to travel to Edo completely unrecognized, but his face was incredibly well known. So what does he do? He deliberately smashes his own front teeth, he intentionally burns his own face, and then he actively poisons himself with mercury.
And the mercury poisoning is particularly grim, but it perfectly illustrates the ruthless logic of hensujutsu.
Right, but why mercury? What does that actually do to a person's appearance?
Well, mercury poisoning induces horrific physical symptoms. We're talking uncontrollable tremors, profuse sweating, decaying gums, and this pale, really sickly complexion. He essentially gave himself an acute neurodegenerative disease on purpose.
Wow.
So when he approached the Edo guards, they didn't see a legendary wanted warrior. They saw a shaking, toothless, diseased beggar that they just wanted to get away from as quickly as possible.
I read that and immediately thought of extreme method acting, like an actor losing 50 pounds for a role. But the stakes here are just unfathomable.
Right, no Oscars here.
No, Yasube wasn't trying to win an award. If his performance failed, if he looked even slightly like his old self, he would be brutally tortured and executed.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this brings us right back to that philosophy of losing the ego. To survive, you must be willing to violently destroy the self that you are attached to. Your vanity, your comfort, your handsome face. If you cling to those things, you will die. You have to be the water. If the vase requires you to be a broken-toothed, poisoned, trembling beggar to pass through a gate, you become exactly that, without a microsecond of hesitation.
That is heavy. And it leads us to wonder, what does existing in that kind of crucible actually do to the human spirit? I mean, all of these extreme practices, from the vanishing movements to the terrifying psychological duels to the self-mutilation for disguise, they were forged in the absolute harsh reality of life and death.
And the historical texts are very clear about the brutal toll this takes. There's a documented encounter between a warrior named Seikō and a vicious assassin named Saburo Mochizuki.
Yeah.
And the account really highlights the chaotic, constantly morphing nature of real combat. Saburo is described as moving with this lightning-quick dexterity where his distance and his guard are just continuously shifting.
So not a movie fight scene.
No, it wasn't a choreographed dance. It was chaotic, desperate, and morphing by the millisecond.
And to survive that kind of relentless chaos, the records point to a truth famously echoed by the philosopher Montesquieu, right? Who said, one knows only what one practices.
Exactly. The way you practice under pressure absolutely reflects your hidden character.
The text also references a teaching from the 6th century poet Antara. He taught his son that war sharpens the senses, improves the body, and is where one can find the measure of a man.
Which really culminates in a profound realization from Takamatsu, the same master who gave us the water and vase analogy earlier.
Right.
He observed that true character is formed with enduring patience, and through that patience, one acquires faith. He actually taught that endurance is half of faith and patience is the other half. You have to believe completely in your victory and your survival in order to fight against your own deeply ingrained instincts.
Okay, I have to stop and ask a bridging question here. Let's bring this back down to earth for a second, because most of the people listening to this deep dive are never going to fight an assassin on a bridge in the moonlight.
I certainly hope not.
Right, and we are certainly never going to have to poison ourselves with mercury just to travel to the next city. So how does this intense life or death measure of a man apply to someone just commuting to work or dealing with modern life?
Well, this raises an important question, and the masters actually address this directly. They stated that the principles of battlefield survival apply equally to the perpetual combat against oneself.
Against yourself?
Yeah, Takamatsu reported that in the fight against one's own ego, we are always walking the edge of the blade.
The edge of the blade?
Yes, you don't have to go to a literal battlefield to seek self-knowledge, but you do have to honestly face your internal reality. True peace, according to these doctrines, can only be found when a person fully acknowledges their own capacity for violence, disruption, and failure.
That makes sense.
It is very easy to wound, to attack, to let your ego destroy a relationship or an opportunity. To seek peace while fully knowing you are capable of appalling acts requires a state of mind that is totally free of encumbrances. You essentially subdue your undesirable behavior patterns through relentless internal discipline, exactly the same way a shadow warrior subdues an enemy.
So when we strip away all the Hollywood myths, the true definition of the shadow warrior really isn't an invisible magician throwing smoke bombs.
Not at all.
The authentic ninja, the Kanja, was a master of the mind. They were the man in the middle, perfectly and ruthlessly adapted to the exact shape of their chaotic environment. They were just ordinary humans who conquered their own egos so completely that they could endure absolutely anything to survive.
They really understood, better than anyone in history, that physical tension is the enemy of movement, internal doubt is the enemy of survival, and the ego is the ultimate enemy of adaptability.
Which leaves us with something I want you, the listener, to actively reflect on today. Think about the tension you are carrying in your own body and mind right now. Where in your life are you needlessly tensing up and telegraphing your intentions to the world? And more importantly, where is your own ego? Your stubborn attachment to who you think you are, getting in the way of your ability to adapt to a changing situation.
And I'll leave you with a final provocative thought to just mull over. If, as the old masters taught, the color of the water is the color of its face, take a hard look at the environments, the routines, and the daily pressures you submerge yourself in every single day.
Yeah.
Are you consciously choosing the shape of your vase? Or are you just letting the vase choose the shape of your mind?
Remember, the real magic isn't disappearing in a cloud of smoke. It's having the mental fluidity to survive whatever the world throws at you.
SuieishinDojo. Yeah. SuieishinDojo. From silence to impact. Sell fantasy. This is pressure and pain, cold mind, sharp focus, discipline in my veins, real combat movement. No scripted display, every step calculated when the shadows invade. Kirin in the body, survival in the brain. Years under pressure turn instinct into aim. No fake masters, no internet fame. We train for the chaos when the world goes insane. Dark shadows sin screaming through the smoke and rain. Taiko drums hit like a war campaign. Subconscious reactions when adrenaline drains. Combat physiology breaking mental chains. SuieishinDojo. Shadow in the water, warrior soul alive. SuieishinDojo. From the basics to the blade we survive. SuieishinDojo. No fear, no illusion, no disguise. Mind, body, spirit, weaponized. Weaponized. Emoji stands while the enemy shakes. Calm breathing under pressure when the whole ground breaks. Ambidextrous movement, every angle precise. Real combat doesn't care if you're weak inside. Druckle root flow with the predator gaze. Koto view impact like explosive grenades. Ancient principles adapted to today. Old warrior knowledge in a modern age. Pulse low, eyes locked, strategy first. Silence before violence when survival bursts. Caden including lessons earned, not thought. Real transmission cannot be taught by frauds. From Cuba to the world, SuieishinDojo. Warrior mindset, survival culture. SuieishinDojo. Water shadows still in control.